Welcome back to our channel. Today, we set sail on an extraordinary journey to explore the enigmatic Bermuda Triangle. Brace yourself as we unravel the secrets of this infamous stretch of ocean. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is a region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. Its borders are marked by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. For decades, this vast expanse has captivated the imaginations of many, as countless ships and planes have mysteriously vanished within its boundaries. The first documented disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle occurred in 1945 when Flight 19, a group of U.S. Navy bombers, vanished without a trace during a training exercise. Since then, numerous vessels and aircraft have vanished, leaving behind only questions and theories. The Bermuda Triangle has been a subject of fascination for years. Many theories attempt to explain its mysteries, ranging from natural phenomena to extraterrestrial involvement. Some believe it's a vortex or a portal to another dimension, while others argue it's the result of powerful underwater currents. One theory suggests that methane gas seeping from the ocean floor could cause ships to lose buoyancy, leading to their disappearance. Another hypothesis suggests that electromagnetic anomalies within the triangle interfere with navigation systems, causing compasses to malfunction and pilots to lose their bearings. In recent years, researchers have conducted extensive studies in the triangle, using advanced technology to explore its depths. They've discovered ancient shipwrecks and geological formations, shedding light on the region's natural history. It began as nothing more than a routine training flight. At 2:10 p.m. on December 5, 1945, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The planes, collectively known as Flight 19, were scheduled to tackle a 3-hour exercise known as Navigation Problem No. 1. Their triangular flight plan called for them to head east from the Florida coast and conduct bombing runs at a place called Hens and Chickens Shoals. They would then turn north and proceed over Grand Bahama Island before changing course a third time and flying southwest back to base. Save for one plane that only carried 2 men, each of the Avengers was crewed by 3 Navy men or Marines, most of whom had logged around 300 hours in the air. The flight's leader was Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, an experienced pilot and veteran of several combat missions in World War II's Pacific Theater. At first, Flight 19's hop proceeded just as smoothly as the previous 18 that day. Taylor and his pilots buzzed over Hens and Chickens Shoals around 2:30 p.m. and dropped their practice bombs without incident. But shortly after the patrol turned north for the second leg of its journey, something very strange happened. For reasons that are still unclear, Taylor became convinced that his Avenger's compass was malfunctioning and that his planes had been flying in the wrong direction. The troubles only mounted after a front blew in and brought rain, gusting winds and heavy cloud cover. Flight 19 became hopelessly disoriented. "I don't know where we are," one of the pilots said over the radio. "We must have got lost after that last turn." Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, another Navy flight instructor who was flying near the Florida coast, was the first to overhear the patrol's radio communications. He immediately informed the air station of the situation and then contacted the Avengers to ask if they needed assistance. "Both my compasses are out and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida," Taylor said, his voice sounding anxious. "I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down." Taylor's claim didn't seem to make sense. He'd made his scheduled pass over Hens and Chicken Shoals in the Bahamas less than an hour earlier, but he now believed his planes had somehow drifted hundreds of miles off course and ended up in the Florida Keys. The 27-year-old had just transferred to Fort Lauderdale from Miami, and many have since speculated that he may have confused some of the islands of the Bahamas for the Keys. Under normal circumstances, pilots lost in the Atlantic were supposed to point their planes toward the setting sun and fly west toward the mainland, but Taylor had become convinced that he might be over the Gulf of Mexico. Hoping to locate the Florida Peninsula, he made a fateful decision to steer Flight 19 northeast, a course that would only take them even farther out to sea. Some of his pilots seemed to have recognized that he was making a mistake. "Damn it," one man griped over the radio. "If we would just fly west, we would get home." Taylor was eventually persuaded to turn around and head west, but shortly after 6 p.m., he seems to have cancelled the order and once again changed direction. "We didn't go far enough east," he said, still worried that he might be in the Gulf. "We may as well just turn around and go east again." His pilots probably argued against the decision. Some investigators even believe that one plane broke off and flew in a different direction, but most followed their commander's lead. Flight 19's radio transmissions soon became increasingly faint as it meandered out to sea. When fuel began to run low, Taylor was heard prepping his men for a potential crash landing in the ocean. "All planes close up tight," he said. "We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." A few minutes later, the Avenger's last radio communications were replaced by an eerie buzz of static. The Navy immediately scrambled search planes to hunt for the missing patrol. Around 7:30 p.m., a pair of PBM Mariner flying boats took off from an air station north of Fort Lauderdale. Just 20 minutes later, however, one of them seemed to follow Flight 19's lead by suddenly vanishing off the radar. The remains of the Mariner and its 13 crewmen were never recovered, but it's commonly believed that the seaplane exploded shortly after takeoff. Flying boats were notoriously accident-prone, and were even nicknamed flying gas tanks for their propensity for catching fire. Suspicions that the seaplane may have gone up in flames were all but confirmed by a passing merchant ship, which spotted a fireball and found evidence of an oil slick in the ocean. At first light the next day, the Navy dispatched more than 300 boats and aircraft to look for Flight 19 and the missing Mariner. The search party spent 5 days combing through more than 300,000 square miles of territory, to no avail. "They just vanished," Navy Lieutenant David White later recalled. "We had hundreds of planes out looking, and we searched over land and water for days, and nobody ever found the bodies or any debris." A Navy Board of Investigation was also left scratching its head. While it argued that Taylor might have confused the Bahamas for the Florida Keys after his compass malfunctioned, it could find no clear explanation for why Flight 19 had become so disoriented. Its members eventually attributed the loss to causes or reasons unknown. The strange events of December 5, 1945, have since become fodder for all manner of wild theories and speculation. In the 1960s and 70s, pulp magazines and writers such as Vincent Gaddis and Charles Berlitz helped popularize the idea that Flight 19 had been gobbled up by the Bermuda Triangle, a section of the Atlantic supposedly known for its high volume of freak disappearances and mechanical failures. Other books and fictional portrayals have suggested that magnetic anomalies, parallel dimensions and alien abductions might have all played a role in the tragedy. In 1977, the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind famously depicted Flight 19 as having been whisked away by flying saucers and later deposited in the deserts of Mexico. Even if the Lost Patrol didn't fall victim to the supernatural, there's no denying that its disappearance was accompanied by many oddities and unanswered questions. Perhaps the strangest of all concerns Lieutenant Taylor. Witnesses later claimed that he arrived to Flight 19's pre-exercise briefing several minutes late and requested to be excused from leading the mission. "I just don't want to take this one out," he supposedly said. Just why Taylor tried to get out of flying remains a mystery, but it has led many to suggest that he may have not been fit for duty. Also unexplained is why none of the members of Flight 19 made use of the rescue radio frequency or their plane's ZBX receivers, which could have helped lead them toward Navy radio towers on land. The pilots were told to switch the devices on, but they either didn't hear the message or didn't acknowledge it. What really happened to Flight 19? The most likely scenario is that the planes eventually ran out of gas and ditched in the ocean somewhere off the coast of Florida, leaving any survivors at the mercy of rough seas and deep water. In 1991, a group of treasure hunters seemed to have finally solved the puzzle when they stumbled upon the watery graves of 5 World War II-era Avengers near Fort Lauderdale. Unfortunately, it was later found that the hulks belonged to a different group of Navy planes whose serial numbers didn't match those of the fabled Lost Patrol. Many believe the wrecks of Flight 19 and its doomed rescue plane may still lurk somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle, but while the search continues to this day, no definitive signs of the 6 aircraft or their 27 crewmen have ever been found. One of the largest ships in the U.S. Navy disappeared without a trace. More than 100 years later, its fate remains unknown. How could the biggest ship in the U.S. Navy vanish without trace? This was the question on many people's minds in March 1918, when an enormous collier, the USS Cyclops, disappeared on a voyage between the West Indies to Baltimore. A century on, it's no closer to being answered. The Cyclops was nearly 550 feet long, with a crew of 306 people and around 11,000 tons of manganese aboard. She had been sailing successfully since 1910, traveling between the Baltic Sea, the Caribbean and Mexico and assisting with moving coal around the world and helping refugees. But in 1917, when America entered World War I, Cyclops became a key naval asset, transporting troops and coal to fuel other ships all over the world. In March 1918, the ship was given a new cargo, tons and tons of dense manganese ore, used in steelmaking. She left Brazil loaded up with the brittle metal, then voyaged to Barbados to resupply for the long journey home to Baltimore. The last known message from the ship said simply, "Weather fair, all well." But on the 9-day journey, something went awry, and no one from the ship was ever seen or heard again, vanishing without even an SOS. In a feature published a couple of years after the ship's disappearance, Santa Fe magazine described the strangeness of the disappearance. Usually a wooden bucket or a cork life preserver identified as belonging to a lost ship is picked up after a wreck, but not so with the Cyclops, they reported. She just disappeared as though some gigantic monster of the sea had grabbed her, men and all, and sent her into the depths of the ocean, and the suddenness of her destruction is amplified by the absence of any wireless calls for help being picked up by any ship along the route. Throughout the decades, there have been a flurry of sometimes sensational theories about the ship's disappearance, as one among more than 100 ships and planes to have mysteriously disappeared in the so-called Bermuda Triangle. Was the ship eaten by some beast of the deep, carried off as evidence by UFOs, or simply scuppered by a storm? At the time, people wondered whether the ship and crew had been the victim of a German submarine or raider. It was barely a year into the war, and the Cyclops would have made a strategic target. Yet nothing materialized, and as time went on, it has become less and less likely that German crafts had been in the area at all. Others have pointed fingers at the captain, George W. Worley. Months earlier, some members of the crew claimed Worley was a drunk, unsuitable to steer a ship. There were even reports of a minor mutiny staged on board the ship. The Navy defended Worley of these charges, and he returned to his command with apparently little fanfare. The U.S. Navy says in its official statement about the Cyclops, the disappearance of this ship has been one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy, all attempts to locate her having proved unsuccessful. But some still cling to investigations, particularly those with a personal connection to the ship. Marvin Barash is the descendant of one of the firefighters aboard the ship. He has spent more than a decade researching its history, painstakingly gathering Navy records, ship logs and any ephemera that might come in useful, including a blackened bag of manganese ore. The whole existence of the ship has been swept under a rug, he told the Baltimore Sun. It wasn't like it was lost in a glorious battle. It just kind of fell off the face of the earth. Barash has his own suspicions about what happened to this lost colossus, a series of mechanical failures, a crew unused to the new heavy cargo, and a final, great rolling wave that tipped the ship and her passengers into the ocean forever. All of this, he thinks, may have coincided with the ship passing over the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest part of the Atlantic, where she would be near irretrievable. Despite his misgivings, Barash retains some hope that the ship will be discovered, especially as undersea exploration technology improves. There are fewer and fewer lost shipwrecks every year, with high-tech devices spotting vessels believed to be gone for good. The Cyclops may be next on the list. "I just want her to be found," Barash said. "I want the 309 to be at rest, as well as the families. It's something everybody needs, some resolution."